Before we start this episode, I advise you to check the content warnings in the description, as it can get a little exciting in this chapter. Thank you so much, and now we can begin Set Him Free, Chapter 18. There was nothing to save him now. Janus sat at the kitchen table, his face illuminated only by a candle at the center of the room. Cold eyes pierced through Virgil, and he resisted the urge to fall apart then and there. Janus beckoned him forward with a wave of his hand, and Virgil slowly turned from the hallway entrance. There was a small shake to Virgil's hands as he stepped forward. Janus noticed this, allowing his eyes to lazily glance over the thief. Virgil quickly clenched his fist to stop the trembling. There was a coolness to the inventor's expression, almost calm. But Virgil knew that was anything but true. "So," Janus started, his voice flowing like molasses. "You've been out." "I can't explain," Virgil blurted. Janus flashed a serpentine smile. "By all means, lead the way then." Virgil gulped, wringing his hands together. "It was Roman. He escaped. There wasn't time to wake you up before he would get away completely, so I just chased after him. He was too fast. I tried to keep up, but he was lost to the forest before I could even blink." Virgil was rambling now, spinning lies like spider webs, hoping with everything that Janus would be caught in one of them. "I swear, I searched every inch of that forest. He's gone." Janus clasped his hands together, considering, as the room was plunged into a complete silence. The eerie flickering of the candle only added to the tension, and Virgil wished greatly to extinguish it so he could be concealed within the cover of the shadows. Anything to escape the inventor's eyes, cold, green, and piercing. With a gentle sigh, Janus's eyes drifted back up from the table. "You have no need in quivering so much, Virgil. I believe you." "Really?" "No." Virgil's face drained of color as Janus held up the lock-picking kit. Before he could react, a figure emerged from behind him, and he felt a shock spread through his veins. He cried out as volts of static encompassed him, pricking every inch of his body. It hurt unlike anything he had felt before. His knees buckled, and he felt himself falling backwards. He landed limply in Remus's arms, who had been standing unnoticed behind him the whole time. Virgil groaned at the sharp ache that was settling in his bones. Wisps of electricity still teased his ankles, and then snaked to the ground with a final crackle. "Do you like it?" Janus stood with a sly grin. "I figured it was about time I created a new invention." Virgil wanted to sneer back, though his head was pounding. His chest slowly rose and fell with each shallow breath, and his limbs burned with the harsh imprint of the electricity. He felt himself being dragged away, somewhere down the hall as Janus followed leisurely behind. "Static electricity is such an unconventional tool, but very effective when concentrated into one place," Janus continued. "I should thank you for being such a willing first test subject. I was starting to think I'd never be able to know if it worked. That is, until you decided to betray me." Virgil heard the chink of a latch distantly behind him, and he immediately grew tense as he realized where he was being taken. Hardwood floors dragged under his feet until he was hurled to the ground. Virgil yelped as he collided with the back wall, adding on to the soreness within his bones. He grit his teeth, wincing as cold iron snapped around his wrists. Now, the sound of chuckling echoed in Virgil's ears, and it didn't take a detective to know where it was coming from. "After all we've been through, I never believed you would do such a thing." "I've done nothing," Virgil managed to choke out. "I find that to be a lie, just like that wonderful excuse you fabricated upon your return." He crossed the room, his footsteps clicking harshly on the hardwood floors. Honestly, Virgil, you should have known I had caught on to your little games, Janus hummed. It was unwise of you to think that I wouldn't see the way you looked at him, the way you seemed to defend him before you even recognized how you felt. That's not true, Virgil lied through his teeth, straining against his restraints. I feel nothing for him. My allegiance is to you. We're family. Do you really think a royal would change that? I don't know. Why don't you tell me, Virgil? Why don't you explain how you could do such a thing to us, after everything I have done to keep you safe? They're cruel, Virgil. They'll trick you into trusting them before they stab you in the back and destroy everything you've ever loved. Don't you see that's what you're doing? Virgil grunted, the iron bands digging into his wrists. I never wanted to hurt you, Janus. I didn't mean to. You know this is all for the greater good. Destroying the royals is what would lead to the greater good, Janus shouted, his eyes shining a brilliant yellow-green. You have just released a force more dangerous than you could ever imagine, and now everyone must pay the price. Well, maybe it's worth it if it keeps the world out of the hands of you, Virgil sneered, and the room instantly grew quiet. In the corner, he saw Remus blanch, and a shred of guilt tugged at his mind. The older truly hadn't done anything, but it was his association with Janus that made the hurt of his betrayal spread like wildfire. When he looked into Remus's eyes, however, he didn't see hatred or hostility. There was only a lingering sorrow, rendering him silent as Janus strolled forward with an appearance like thunder. He grasped Virgil's cloak, bringing the thief inches from his face. You want to go with the royals? Fine. Watch how they treat you even after you've given them everything they ever wanted. Janus's voice cut through the air in a sharp whisper. Just remember I warned you. Remember, as they're breaking you to pieces, that I tried to help you. Forcing me to commit your dirty work against my will is not helping me. It's not my fault. You can't get over your past. Something flashed in Janus's eyes then. He grew still, while Remus swore in the corner. His hand slipped from Virgil's cloak, and the thief fell to the ground with a grunt. There was a slight tremble to Janus's fingers then, his footsteps echoing just a little too loud as he backed away. Virgil had screwed up. Wait, Jan, he tried to reason. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. The inventor was silent, an empty shell. His rational thought had vanished just moments ago. Remus's eyes were trained wide on Janus, which only increased Virgil's worry. Janus, he pleaded, now desperate. I didn't mean, just forget I said that. He strained forward, but was cut short by the length of the chain. I'm sorry, please. I didn't mean to remind you. He looked frantically to Remus, whose gaze was fixed intently on Janus. There was the same sense of confused panic in his eyes. Suddenly, a twitch. A slight quirk of the inventor's brow as he clenched his fists tight. Yellow-green eyes trailed, unseeing before but now flaring with distaste. There was a fire to Janus's tongue, and his words crackled as he spoke. You have no obligation to speak of such terrors. There was something about the flash of his words that left Virgil recoiling. I'm sorry. Too late. You've already severed your ties with this family. What? The beginnings of a smirk slipped onto Janus's face as he regained his sly confidence. An unhinged glint still lingered in his eyes, however, leaving Virgil to anxiously wonder if the cunning persona served as a temporary mask. Oh, Virgil, he purred, strolling to rest in the shadows of the corner. Don't think I'm ignorant enough to be without a plan. You won't do it. Not when I... Not when you what, Virgil? Deceived me? Endangered the balance of our world? Virgil drew back, eyes narrowed. What are you going to do? I am not going to do anything, the inventor said, lazily reaching into his pocket. He retrieved a small slip of paper, a second copy of a letter, no doubt. It's your new kingdom friends that you should be worrying about. The color drained from Virgil's face. No. The royal guard is on their way as we speak. Ironic how you've aided the thing that will lead to your ultimate demise. You're crazy, Virgil spat, wrestling against the shackles. You're really going to sell me out? Remus glanced up at this, looking hesitantly to Janus. The inventor's expression darkened. We crossed that line the moment Prince Averil stepped foot out of this cottage. He clasped his hands together. Now, we should be going. I wouldn't want to interrupt your upcoming reunion with the monarchs. He turned, his pitch-black cape sweeping behind him. With clean strokes, he strode to the door, wrapping his fingers around the cool iron of the handle. Remus, let's go. The Duke met Janus's gaze, but did not move. His lips turned down, and he fidgeted with the ends of his sleeves. Remus, Janus said again, there's no time to dawdle. Let's go. Are you sure this is the right thing to do? Remus blurted, his eyebrows knit in concern. Excuse me? Come on, Jan. Virg doesn't really deserve this. Remus looked to the ground, and Virgil then understood the oddities of his behavior. Remus was afraid. He had never seen the Duke so much as worry before, but now standing before Janus, he was practically shaking in his boots. Virgil couldn't blame him. There will be no discussing this. Janus's eyes narrowed, and he held his palm outstretched. Rem, Virgil pleaded, don't do this. Janus shot Virgil a glare, his words sharp. Ignore him. He has made his side clear. Please, Rem, we're supposed to look out for each other. Disregard his tainted lies, Remus. We are leaving now. Eyes wide, Remus's gaze bounced between the two. He met Virgil's eyes for a moment, and the thief only saw hesitance. There were invisible strings pulling the elder in both directions, and as much as he hated to distress his friend, Virgil couldn't let Janus get away with this. He mouthed a final plea as the inventor huffed impatiently. The tapping of his boot against the floor demanded a silent command, and Remus's face fell. I'm sorry, Virg, he muttered, then moved to stand beside Janus. Rem, you can't. Do not plague him with your guilt, Virgil, Janus crooned. He doesn't deserve the pain you have brought forth upon us. You don't understand. Virgil lurched forward despite the flash of pain that came from the movement. It was all for the good of Eldon. We needed to bring Roman back before the Queen did something drastic. Your excuses can't save you now. Goodbye, Virgil. Janus pulled open the door, the light of dawn flooding inside the room as he did so. He beckoned for Remus to follow him, and the latter did, though snuck a sorrowful glance back towards the thief as he left. Wait, please! Virgil cried, yanking against his bindings and grimacing as they scraped against his already stinging skin. You can't do this! You're all I have! Janus looked back at this, and for a sliver of time, Virgil thought he caught sight of tears in his eyes. They quickly vanished, and with a slight waver in his voice, he answered, No, Virgil. We were all you had. Now, you'll live with the pain of your actions. His fingers drifted to the scar on his face. Farewell. He pulled the door closed, shutting out Virgil's cries and plunging the room into darkness. The thief was swallowed in a sea of black and cold, his only remaining solace ripped from his fingers with the final goodbye. He was alone, truly and awfully alone. This has been Chapter 18 of Set Him Free. Thank you so very much for listening, and I will see you next time for Chapter 19.